Hey, Callie, I'd like you to settle something for us.
What's up?
Well, El Capitan wants to abbreviate the Texas Chainsaw Massacre as TCSM because of some existing poster art that has chainsaw as two words.
Fine. Go nuts.
Wait, but Rick wants to abbreviate it as TCM because of some really weird poster art that has chainsaw spelled as one word.
Great. Sounds good to me.
Well, which one of us is right?
Let me answer your thought provoking dilemma this way.
Callie has left the chat.
She did that on our first date, too.
Hello and welcome to MonsterKid Fury. I'm Callie. Here today we have Rich of MonsterKid Central. Hey, Rich.
Howdy.
And Rick of Film Fury. Hi, baby.
I'm the Lord of the Harvest.
We have something fun happening.
Well, we had so much fun doing our director-centric episode on John Carpenter. We knew we wanted to jump into another, and we have chosen for this episode Tobe Hooper.
Absolutely. The guy has some iconic movies behind him, and you know what? That's good enough for me.
He is easily one of the most underappreciated horror filmmakers, I think.
Couldn't agree
And
more.
what I've noticed after we lose one of these legends, there's a little buzz out there, and suddenly people are like, "Oh wow, I love his stuff," and then it just kind of disappears into the ether, and we don't hear any continued conversation about his work and how it's impacted so many other filmmakers.
Yep.
Now, the funny thing with me, the original Texas Chainsaw was not my first connection to Tobe Hooper because my
Wow.
mom would not let me see that movie. She had seen it, and I think it was because it was unrated, X-rated, effectively. There was just something, there was a stigma to it that she just wouldn't let me into that right away. And in fact, when part two came out, I wasn't able to see it anyways because it was unrated, which is just as bad as an X rating. No wonder under 18 would be admitted even with an adult at that point.
Right.
So I got to hear the stories about Texas Chainsaw Massacre from my mother. It took me a long time to be able to see the movies, and even then, I saw part two first, which may have something to do with
Wow.
my appreciation for the film, because a certain elder amongst us doesn't like part two, surprisingly.
Oh, me. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, probably that guy resembling you over there. Yeah.
Yeah. I will reserve comment till we get there, but it's just, yeah. So,
So
and I am so I so revere the first one that it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I'm not talking about in order, but it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Psycho, Night of the Living Dead, The Exorcist, and and huh, well, I'm forgetting one of them, but anyway, those are those have always been the ones. Oh, and Halloween, sorry, that were all instances in my life where I was sitting in the audience going, "Uh-oh, I'm screwed." It's that feeling that you get when you're watching something and it's not going to be the norm.
It's
So,
life altering experience. There
absolutely.
you
yeah.
go.
See, so my first connection with Hooper was actually the TV miniseries Salem's Lot.
Oh,
That was the first time I had watched any of his work, not even knowing at the time who he was or the impact he would later have on me as a filmmaker. And that miniseries scared the shit out of me. It was amazing to me that something meant for TV, obviously, that had commercial breaks every 20 minutes or so. And of course, I saw it in its syndication run. And I was too young to see the original airing on CBS back in the day. But when Barlow comes through that window in that mass and hits the ground, and they do that wonderful cut of him slowly rising up, I was just on the edge of my seat.
yeah.
There's just so many just brilliant terrifying moments when Jeffrey Lewis is sitting in the chair, all vamped out and everything. I mean, just incredible work. To think that aired during prime time.
Goosebumps.
During prime time, people sitting there with their TV dinners are like, the fuck are they showing right now?
Yeah.
It's just, and let it be said, the miniseries, in my opinion, is better than the original source material. When I read Salem's Lot, the novel, I was so disappointed
Okay, I'll
because
give you that.
because Barlow, to me, he seemed like a bargain basement Dracula.
Right.
Like when I'm reading the scene of him coming across the hobos at the fire, and I'm just like,
Because
this isn't scary. This isn't, there's something about Barlow and what they came up with, and I don't know how much of it was Hooper and how much of was it Lawrence Cohen, no relation to Larry Cohen, who wrote it. But there's just something in there about making Barlow this creature, literally creature of the night. And it's just, again, obviously inspired by the image of Nosferatu.
Yep.
But my God, it's just such an iconic, terrifying image.
So, question for you: you actually saw the movie or the miniseries before you read the book?
Yes.
So you
Yes.
saw that, realized that it was book, and you're like, "Oh, let me go read this." And when you read the book, you're like, "Okay, all right."
See, and that's the funny thing with Stephen King for me, though. In many cases, maybe I would say in a majority of the cases, I've seen the movie first, and I want to go back to the book because I was reading so many books at the time, especially as a preteen and teen. But I really feel he is a great idea guy, but the execution and his endings always seem terribly weak. Christine is a perfect example of that. I think Christine had too many things going on in the book as an explanation for the evil, if you will. I think the screenwriter and John Carpenter for the film version, they streamlined it to where, no, the car just needs to be evil, and we're just going to keep it like that, evil absolute. The book, just too many things I didn't like in it.
And the funny thing is, I think just the opposite for the same exact reasons. I'm glad.
Really?
Yeah, I'm glad. I think one of the downfalls of the movie, and we talked about it,
Yeah.
is the fact that the car proves itself to be the bad guy 30 seconds in. And
Right.
I thought that was a huge mistake. But you know what? Whatever. I mean, it just, these are opinions, and you know what they say about opinions.
That you, never mind. So,
But
well, how did you feel about Salem's Lot as an adaptation compared to the book? How did you feel about the book in comparison?
I liked the book, but I read it first.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw the miniseries and fucking loved it. I mean, oh my God. And the funny thing is, I keep saying Texas Chainsaw is my favorite Tobe Hooper film, but
Mm-hmm.
I could argue over Salem's Lot. Salem's Lot is brilliantly done. And God, I absolutely love that. And it scares me in 4 or 5 places.
The opening titles alone, just the shot of the house and
Yep,
that incredible score, the dun 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 dun, dun, it's just this huge, almost Hammer film sort of score,
yep.
and it's just immediately you're like, holy shit, this is going to be great, and it doesn't disappoint.
No, it's just so good.
So,
And
oh,
yes, go ahead.
where does this fall in Hooper's timeline of work?
Uh,
This is
Pretty far in.
after Chainsaw Massacre and Eaten Alive, which was his second feature.
Oh,
And that got him into the door of directing this miniseries, and it was his first time dealing with a studio and producers, and all the things that come with it in terms of the stresses and the politics of a studio.
That said, it, God, it's pretty flawless to me.
Oh
mm.
yeah,
I
I mean,
just
they
can't.
gave him complete freedom to do whatever he wanted,
And
and
thank
Stephen
God
King
for
was
that.
backing him up.
In
Oh,
the
definitely.
miniseries?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, it helped that Stephen King at the time, he had already gained enough street cred, if you will, to actually have a lot of say in who was hired and how things were going to be done. And he
Nice.
was perfectly fine with Hooper as a choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
It's wonderful.
what was Hooper's first movie then?
Well,
Chainsaw Massacre was his first feature,
yeah.
but he had done
Okay.
2 short films before that, Eggshells and the Heisters, I think it's called,
Yeah.
which is this weird fantasy short film about 3 thieves. It's a very bizarre little movie, and Eggshells is a counterculture dealing with the political atmosphere
So
of
no
the time.
horror.
So nothing to indicate that he would turn around
And
but the funny
do
thing is he still claims that Texas Chainsaw Massacre is meant to have elements of comedy.
Yeah.
And
About that.
I I think what that is, all right, I had a discussion with my daughter about this and Callie. When you're a director and you watch a scene happen in front of you, and I'm sure Rich can attest to this when working on film and television, when a line goes perfectly or a moment happens exactly the way you envision it, you giggle and you laugh and you're just like a little kid, you're giddy. Something tells me he was just probably very giddy at the scenes. I don't know if you could really perceive it as a comedy, but apparently that's what was said. I mean, I guess you could laugh at the part where Leatherface is sitting near the window, stressed out that people keep coming into the house and he has to keep dispatching them. And
Right.
he's just like, oh, he's just hitting his head. He's like, what is
Right.
going on?
gotcha.
And I know the quote Hooper always uses in commentaries is, where do they keep coming from? Why do they keep coming in here?
Yep.
He's like, I got to worry about dinner tonight, and these people keep coming by the house. What's going on?
Hey, dinner keeps coming by.
Yeah. That's true. That's
But
true.
I think the one thing I've heard people attribute numerous parallels and analogies that Hooper was trying to make with that film. He's been kind of a little low key, very much like Romero. I think it's just kind of like, this is the movie I wanted to make, but you can see where people can easily make the correlations to, again, politics at the time and the atmosphere in the country. The counterculture clash is going on because we're talking how many years after Kent State the chainsaw
Yeah.
was made? Was it less than 10
6.
years?
Yes. It
Yeah.
would be about 6.
What is
So
Kent State?
Kent State was a college where a group of protesters were actually fired upon by authorities.
Oh
Uh,
Lord.
remember Watchmen? I
By
don't know if you
our
remember the
government.
opening credits, right? By our government. Remember the opening credits where you see the military police holding a rifle and a little pretty hippie girl comes up with a flower and puts it into the barrel of the gun and the gun
Yeah.
goes off? That's what they were calling back to, was that
Oh,
imagery. Yeah.
damn.
Yeah. But you also had the gas crisis in the country at that point. There's just the idea of industrialization taking out what used to be laborious jobs, farmers, things of that nature. You can see all these themes come into play. The old being taken over by the new, the Chainsaw family obviously being the old and just refusing to go and staying where they are. And then the young people coming in, they're the outsiders. They're the
Yeah.
people who shouldn't be there. And I think that's a wonderful, terrifying sort of idea to have when watching that movie. It's a lot bigger than just some slasher movie. I don't consider Chainsaw a slasher film.
Oh, I don't
I
either.
really don't. Though he gets thrown into it, debatably because of the sequels. There's a lot more going on in that film than it simply being a slasher movie. And to call it a slasher movie, then it's one of the goreless slasher movies
Right.
imaginable.
Yeah.
It's the greatest trick that film plays is it makes you think you've seen things that you haven't.
And people will tell you that they've seen it.
Yeah,
Oh,
I've heard that.
absolutely. How many
Hmm.
times have you heard, "Oh no, when she gets hung on that hook?"
Yep. That sucker
Yep.
goes right through.
But see, and the funny thing is, Hooper was on the phone with the ratings board, and he literally, with a straight face, asked people over the phone, "How can I hang a woman on a hook and still get a PG rating?" Which the fact that he got an answer is hilarious
Right.
because I
Yeah.
think if I was in the office, I'd have been like, "All right, this is a joke.
They're giving
Obviously,
you guidelines. Nope, nope.
somebody's messing with me. Obviously." So Yeah,
Did
and
he
that
get a
movie.
PG-13 rating on that or no? It was
Oh no,
R.
no, no, yeah, no. There was no way that movie, even for its time, was going to get a PG by any means.
Okay.
But Chainsaw Massacre is not only important for everything it accomplished, just in the genre, but it was one of the first really notable movies made in the Austin film community. At that point, they were trying very hard to create a new Hollywood, if you will, that, hey, come here, come shoot. And of course, today Austin has become sort of a little mini capital of
Absolutely.
independent film production.
Yeah.
You have Robert Rodriguez, who runs out there, just numerous filmmakers who operate out of there now. Of course, it's much more expensive now because, kind of like when Sundance went and created everything where they did, suddenly property values go up and everything else.
Yeah.
But at the time, again, they were trying to create a film community. And Chainsaw actually employed quite a few people who went on to other films. Most notably, Ted Nicolau, who went on to direct numerous movies for Full Moon Entertainment, including the Subspecies movies. Um, Daniel Pearl, who was his
Oh
DP
gosh,
for
yeah.
that movie.
I
He's
love
he's
that
he's
guy.
What's remarkable about Daniel Pearl is not only does he DP the original Chainsaw, but then he got hired to do the remake,
Yep.
which I thought was amazing. So that's what a great thing to do, to be able to go back to a movie series that you helped to start, and you get a whole new slant on it, and you give it a whole new visual flair. But of course, the original, being so scrapped together, if you will, and so low budget, it, just so many parts in that movie. And you know what's amazing? Every time I watch it, for a low budget movie, there is so much camera movement.
Yep.
It's really wild. uh, One of the shots I love is at the gas station when they show up to buy the gas and get some food. There's that wonderful shot of them getting, it's a low angle as they get out of the vehicle. Everyone's hopping out, and the camera just does this wonderful move.
Yep.
And then later when they're about to leave, and they're asking the cook, hey, when are you gonna have gas? He's like, I don't know, the truck's gonna come later. And that little helper of his,
Yeah.
who keeps walking over to the vehicle to clean it, and he's just like, and then the moment the cook's done and walks away, he's like, okay, I'm done. And he
Yep.
goes to leave, then the cook comes back, and the guy's like, starts cleaning all. It reminds me of like Mano Sans of Fate, but serious. Like every time I
Right.
see him do that, I keep hearing dun 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 dun.
But
But
see,
it is there.
if that's the kind of thing that Hooper is talking about with
Mhm.
his humor, okay, I'm I'm fine with that. But let's not make it sound like there's a heck of a lot of humor. I mean, nothing can. I don't know many movies that are void of humor. So
when when
yes,
Franklin falls down that hill, that's hilarious.
but the truth is, let's not let's not make the first one have a lot of comedy in it, because the truth is the second one does.
Yeah,
And if you can't tell the difference in atmosphere between the first and the second one, you know something's wrong. So if the second one has humor, the first one really doesn't. I will hold to that till the day I croak. I just that movie did not make me want to chuckle. If the first one had been a completely different animal, I would have accepted the second one more.
hmm
Um, but the funny thing is, I never saw the parallel. I mean, it would have been years after, but I never saw the parallel between Evil Dead and Evil Dead Dead by Dawn. Yet it
right.
really kind of is. Um, it was just I never said that about that, but my feeling is I don't think Evil Dead is Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I don't think it has that much historical import. I'm not talking about a lot less. It's an incredibly important movie, Evil Dead.
But it didn't imprint on you the way the original Chainsaw did.
Right. So then to come back with that, it just I wanted to go there and get as scared as I was from in the first one, I wanted him to do it to me again. So
when I finally did get to see Chainsaw 1, it was again after I had viewed part 2, and my mom was like, "All right, well, you made it through part 2. I guess we'll go ahead and watch this now." I can't remember how old I was. Maybe 12? But we watched it because it was coming on Joe Bob, who was over on the movie channel at the time.
right.
So she felt, if anything else, when it would cut back to Joe Bob occasionally, that
You'd get a break.
yeah, a little relief valve.
Right.
And yeah, she was right. That movie just messed me up. And I know a lot of folks will attribute the whole cinema verite kind of documentarian feel to it, that helps suck you in, and it does. But just the imagery is so stark and just so like when they walk into the house the first time.
Yeah.
Nothing happens in that scene, but it's so terrifying.
Right.
You're waiting for something to happen. And I remember, again, back in the day, we didn't have the greatest high definition television as now. But when he looks in the corner and it's the spiders, I didn't know what that was as a kid. To
Right.
me, that was like an Eraserhead moment. I'm just like, what the hell is going on?
Yep.
Yeah, there's again, and it is just such a lovely movie in terms of I can watch it again and again. When I start watching it, I won't stop. I'm going to continue watching the whole thing. Even if I have it on for background noise,
Right.
I'll walk in for certain moments.
Yep.
It's just such a brilliant film. And that first kill, when he takes him out and and that door slams,
Yeah. And
oh,
and
it's
the
just
funny thing is,
amazing.
I was just going to mention that the hook always surpasses the door to most people in the audience. So if you ask them afterwards, they'll say, "Oh yeah, God, that hook." But that door slam is as deadly to the watcher as anything else. I mean, oh my God, it's such a definitive door slam. It's like shit just happened and boom, you're not involved anymore. You don't get to see.
And
But
what's
it's
wonderful is
oh
not in the original script. They
yeah,
came up with that because Hooper, once again, people underplay his talent and just what a genius he was. He was like, we just can't take him out. There's got to be something to just and he literally had the production designer build that door.
yeah,
Oh,
They made that door
yeah.
specifically for that shot.
so question. When this came out, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, was it
Mm.
the first kind, or was it the first of its kind? I guess I should ask.
In my opinion, it was absolutely the first of its kind. The same way Night of the Living Dead was the first of its kind. Halloween was, in my opinion, and I don't want to get into the minutia of Black Christmas. That's for another show.
Okay.
But it was Halloween was very much its own thing, and Psycho was very much its own thing. I mean, Hitchcock had done Psychopaths before with Shadow of a Doubt, but the
Not like
truth
this.
is, no, not like this. And those are the things, the movies that define a genre
Yeah.
that just absolutely blow me away. And like we were just saying, the fact that it could have this one movie could have the hook and have the door slam, that doesn't happen. I mean, it really doesn't. You can pick out one or two things about the movies that I mentioned because they defined a genre. But in most cases, you get one insanely good scare. That's good for that's good for a dozen pictures. This was just there, and there are so many of those in Texas Chainsaw Massacre that you barely recover from the last one.
Okay.
Yeah, there is no relief valve terribly between the score and everything else that comes even in between the kills. It just keeps you in the moment. There is
Right.
no moment to again, going back to why we find it funny that he thought it was a comedy. There's no laughable moments. Once you leave, once they arrive at the house and everything starts happening up to
Mhm.
Kirk's death, yeah, there's no humor whatsoever. And I find it so interesting that the next kill, which is Pam, it's so funny how most men have imprinted on that scene. I imprinted on that scene because it's like, yeah, Pam walking, it's a very nice shot. It's an amazing shot, but you're pulled right back out the moment she ends up. If anything else, you're like, please don't go into the house, pretty lady. Don't go in there. You don't want to go in there.
Yeah.
Which is another remarkable thing Hooper does. The house that belongs to Sally and her family is what? It's old. It's decrepit. It looks like shit. It is the one house you would be fearful of going in.
The
But the
inside anyway,
outside of
right?
right, but the outside of the chainsaw house, it looks pretty pristine.
Yeah.
So it's the greatest trap, if you will. Even to know it's not intended to be a trap by any means, because Leatherface don't want anyone in there. Truly, the family doesn't want anyone in there. But
Keep coming.
people are just like, "Oh, hello, is anybody home?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna go in." It's not until you get in that you see the cavalcade of horrors going on, with animal bones and everything else.
Well, that's the thing. Every single job in that movie appears to have been done by a family member. I mean, think of it.
Mhm.
The set dressing. When did you ever run into that before?
Right.
It's a nightmare, and it comes from absolutely hell. And but when you say when you look at it, you think, well, yeah, okay, the brilliance there is that it looks like they let it just go like that, and that's the family doing that. Well, again, it looks like the camera work, the music, the quote unquote music.
I was just gonna mention that. Yeah,
Who
I'm a
came
huge
up with
fan
that?
of Pope's.
Yeah,
Oh, I know. It's like
who came up with that insanity? And by
they
the
just
way,
released
thanks a
it.
lot.
Okay, they
No,
just
but
released it on vinyl, and I'm like, I can't see myself, as much as I love that movie, sitting down going, I'm just gonna listen to some Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
exactly.
No, because it's just terrifying sounds, is all it is.
Yeah.
It's like pots and pans being beaten together. It's just,
The
it
camera,
is.
right? Like the old school camera flash charging? Is
Oh,
that part
oh,
of
that would be sound design more than score,
Oh,
but
more than
yes,
score. Okay.
what a incredibly, haunting sound,
Yeah.
to the
It
point
sounds
where
scary just
even the remake, they made sure to bring that back because they knew that has become part of that film's lore. Something people instantly think of
Yep.
is that sound, and
It
every
does.
shitty, sequel that got made. And when I say shitty sequel, I mean everything after part three. They were sure to use that to go, oh,
So
remember
that
that?
it's
Let me give you
synonymous.
a member berry. Oh yeah, you love that sound, don't you? Come watch our movie.
Yeah. I I just it I have a tough time picking out something that I like more. It's one of those things where, somebody stupidly asks what's your favorite horror movie? It's like, come on, man. But but it's every bit the equal to Psycho, Night of the Living Dead. Those that group. Um, Holy shit! I mean, really, just it's a splendid movie. It really is.
And as a fellow creative, Rich, how just envious are you that they came up with the just the perfect freaking title ultimately? Now it
Yeah,
was shot under different titles. It was shot under Leatherface. It was shot under was it Cheesecloth or Cheesehead? I think
she's
it was a very weird title.
right.
Yeah, head cheese. There
Head
you go, head
cheese.
cheese. I think. And they settled on that, and I'm like, what an incredible title to literally make people terrified before there's just like, holy shit, a massacre of like people. It's just, it is. And there's other filmmakers. In fact, the creators of the Blair Witch Project is why they titled their movie that,
Yeah.
because they wanted more than one word in something that would just haunt people, after they've seen the movie. The Blair Witch Project. It's just perfect. Same thing, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And of course, John Larroquette, the way it rolls off his
Uh,
tongue in the opening, who was paid by weed,
Oh
by the
yeah.
way. He was
weed,
not paid
yes.
in cash.
Yeah.
He was given weed.
I think everything
But
should be paid in weed, but that's just my
Have
opinion.
the option. I think that's a great option.
and I remember as a kid when I found out that that was him. I read
Yeah.
in Fangoria that that was him. I'm like, you did Dan from Night Court?
Night
He's the
Court. Oh,
narrator? Get the
yeah.
hell out of here. But what an amazing, well done monologue.
Well,
You know,
the funny thing is, when I heard that it was him, I went, bullshit. not a,
I don't believe you.
That's not a chance in hell. So of course I go back and listen to it. It's like, that is so him.
hmm
but
Exactly. It's
but
Dan Fielding all the way.
yeah, you've got him to thank. You've got the writer of the monologue to thank, and
Mm.
the title of the movie to thank for people believing that this happened.
Okay, so that leads into my question. Is it based on a true story?
No,
It
it's
inspired the images that he wanted to come up with, but
Okay.
in terms of like the extent of Leatherface building a female mask, yes, those were inspirations that Hooper took from that real life situation. But there's
Cannibals?
actually a few films that were
Oh,
all yes, because he did eat some of his victims,
okay.
but he wasn't, he didn't have a property with a family. It wasn't a whole group of them. And
Got
it's very interesting, though, that particular psychotic inspired multiple groundbreaking horror tales and films, including Psycho. The original book, Robert Bloch, was inspired by that real life incident.
Yep. Same with
So
The
was,
Exorcist.
right. The Three on a Meat Hook was inspired by Ed Gein.
Yep.
Deranged, which was meant to be a more accurate portrayal of the Ed Gein phenomenon.
Mhm.
That was actually involved Bob Clark, and his co-writer is escaping me right now. Worked on that movie,
Yep.
so it wasn't and that's the thing. Chainsaw wasn't the first of a long line of things. It was its own thing. And I think why people try to correlate them and say, oh, well, this movie probably inspired this. I don't think it was that in so much as it was we had moved from an age of monsters terrifying people. Because we go from the Universal period where it's traditional, if you will, monsters, Frankenstein, Dracula, Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yep.
We go into the
So-
1950s where the they're still monsters, but they're tied to what? They're tied to the nuclear age, about possible war and the outcome of that. And what we had headed to, I believe, in the late 60s and 70s was
Hippies.
it was man's inhumanity to man.
Yeah.
And I think that's why these form of monsters, being serial killers and of the like, that's why we started looking at that, because we were confronted with these real life situations. Because Ed Gein was a real person. He
Yeah.
did these things throughout the 80s. Serial killers became widespread, and I've never read any detailed analysis of that period, but it is very interesting how we have a 10 to 20 year window where just the darkest of humanity came out, you know here, not due to
right.
war or anything else. It's like just evil kind of embedded itself to mankind on some new level. When you look at Ted Bundy, serial killers of that nature, what caused that to happen?
Right.
Even to know he had a series of deathbed confessions and, oh, it was adult material that made me do this. It's like, I don't know. And I think that's the terrifying thing about these type of, I mean, even the Chainsaw family,
So
why did they do this?
without going into a specific topic, If it had been adult material that it did, one of us would probably be in prison right now. So no, that's
True,
not it.
true.
Well, I have to tell you that you will never find me lacking for wanting to talk about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because I truly, I put it right up there. And the fact that I saw I saw it at a drive-in, God, that was so wonderful. I mean, it really was. And then in the theater, like, as many times as humanly possible. But it really is genius. Anyway, so are we ready to move on to Mr.
Other
Hooper's other work?
Well, after he directed Chainsaw, he directed Eaten Alive,
Yep.
which is not the greatest film. I have to freely admit that. In fact, when I saw Eaten Alive, it was after I was far more familiar with his filmography.
I
And
hope you didn't
watching
watch.
it,
I'm sorry. I
go ahead.
hope you didn't watch that. What was it? The SLP video by I don't even remember who it was, but the damn thing had more hits in it than a Tyson fight. It's like,
Yeah,
geez, man, really?
yeah. I may have rented it in that format. I
Yeah,
just remember thinking it was shot so differently.
yeah,
Like everything about it, it almost felt like, and this is not meant to be an insult to Last House on the Left, but it reminded me more of that visual style. It seemed very adult film, like almost like they didn't have a normal film crew, or they had shared the set with an adult film crew.
right.
The one bit of noteworthiness about it is you have a young Robert Englund, super young Robert Englund,
Super young.
a-
Yeah,
as a really nasty individual in this brothel. And Quentin Tarantino was inspired and put the line about "My name is Buck and I like to do things" was pulled from Eaten Alive.
right.
So it's probably one of the biggest things you can say about that movie. And it's like a combination of Psycho and Texas Chainsaw in a weird way.
Yeah, and I don't
Crazy.
think anybody does it any favors by trying to compare it to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I
Yeah,
I saw the movie. I enjoyed the movie. Um, I'm not going to be studying the movie anytime soon.
right.
Let, but I've forensically done that with other Hooper stuff, which is terrific. But I didn't hate it. But it
Right.
is quite definitely its own animal.
It's so weird because it almost feels like a back pedal.
Yes,
It's like it was like he was going uphill with Chainsaw, and then somehow he lost momentum, and it's like Chainsaw Massacre, Eaten Alive,
right.
and it does. It feels like a step backwards. It really does, and I think that's what disappointed me once I saw it. However, Texas Chainsaw had been successful enough to where it still kept his name out there, and he
Right.
was able to get Salem's Lot based upon that.
Yeah,
Which
absolutely.
Which before we leave the Salem's Lot train, because we could probably do a whole episode about Salem's Lot.
Oh God, yeah.
How good is James Mason as
Oh,
Straker? The
sensational.
master. You'll meet the master soon. Just his such an amazing voice and everything, and
Yeah.
the character is just wonderful.
And it
Oh,
so doesn't go with the town of Salem's Lot. I mean, it's perfect. He is so much the outsider that he's almost more of an outsider than Barlow is.
yeah, oh, absolutely.
You
And
know?
and the thing that gets me is that people want to try to tear it apart and say, "Oh, well, Stephen King was trying to do an analogy about a homosexual couple because Barlow and Straker are like husband and husband," and I'm like, or it's just that's his familiar and he is the master. How about we just keep horror? Why does it always have to be something bigger?
Right.
What's the old phrase? Sometimes
Sometimes
a
a
cigar
snake
is
is a
just a
snake.
cigar.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
exactly. We don't. Well, it still applies. And it's just, but Mason, I just love him in that movie so much. And when they did the remake with for TNT with Rob Lowe, they couldn't get it right. And
I didn't
I
bother.
I I watched the first 30 minutes of the newest adaptation that's on HBO. Yeah. I have to agree with Rich at that point where its life is too short to keep watching this crap. I'm good. I don't need this because
Yeah,
apparently you guys didn't watch the Tobe Hooper one to understand what he was able to do with that film in any way, shape, or form.
and the amazing part. Okay, so a parallel with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Uh, as good as some of those scares are, you got the kids floating outside the window, scratching on the window.
Yes.
How often do you get that? And that kind of uh, brilliance, and it doesn't happen to be the best shot in the movie. I mean, it's like wow, because that was terrifying too. That
Oh, I
entire
know.
thing.
Who wants to see their dead best friend outside the window saying,
I
"Hey,
know,
let me in"?
I know.
What I find funny is what made them think that would work. You know, because I would be like that scene in the Buffy movie with Luke Perry and David Arquette. I'd be like, "You're floating."
Right,
I'm not going to open that window.
right. Yeah,
Uh,
it and man, did it work. And I think the kids, I think the younger viewers probably latched onto that
oh
because it's
yeah,
something they could almost imagine.
and
Um,
it was the first time we had a monster kid really in a movie, right?
yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I don't think there had been a movie prior to that or a story prior to that where your lead character, one of your lead characters, is well aware of what they're dealing with because of their interaction. They're in our world,
Right.
if you
And
will.
it's a possibility the next one was Funhouse, but certainly uh, that I think was the first time, and it was like instant
And that
recognition.
was
You know
and that's
exactly what
and
the deal is.
oh, absolutely, and that's a good lead in because that was Hooper's follow up to Eaten Alive was the Funhouse,
Yep,
which I think is a criminally underrated horror film.
I
It gets
agree.
thrown in with the oh, slasher ripoffs at the time. It's not a slasher movie. It's an old dark house movie.
Yeah,
It's the don't go into the haunted house movie is what it is, and it's just so remarkably well done.
with
I
great
love it.
characters.
Oh yeah,
I
you
mean,
love every character in that movie.
yeah, I mean that wo- poor that woman who rushes him through what he has to do. Um,
Hmm.
I-
Oh yeah, yeah.
it's like it's like wait, don't rush me too. It's like God, what a bitch. But yeah,
When
that
yeah,
oh,
when she's been hired for a certain service, and yeah, the monster can't stand to attention. Yeah, it's a pretty stressful scene for the monster.
I just would have loved if his only two words in it would have been not helping.
And it's also one of the first movies to become self-referential so early. Again, like you said, you have a similar character, a kid who is into horror films and he knows how horror films work. And the opening sequence of the Funhouse is literally calling back to the horror films that have been made over the last, 5 years at that point or so. It's pulling from Halloween, it's pulling from Friday the 13th, all those type of films, because
Psycho.
the opening is a stalker and Psycho. It's a stalker shot.
Yep.
It's the eyes of a quote unquote killer as it's stalking a bedroom and then into the shower of the bathroom.
Right.
Now it is very twisted, but that's because Toby's twisted. That it's a little boy doing that to his older sister, which is kind of weird because I don't think that would be. I think I would wait for my sister to get out of the shower and have clothes on before I terrified her.
Right.
But literally, he's doing the very thing that Wes Craven would ultimately do with the Scream movies. He is referring to these other films, and before Brian De Palma did it with Blowout,
Yeah.
because that's the opening sequence in Blowout.
What I love about Funhouse as a whole is that beginning, um, in essence says, "Yeah, I'm bringing you here," And then at a
Right.
certain point, you're like, he's not bringing me there. Wait a minute, because
Did you
it,
really do that?
yeah, because he completely goes off in a different direction, which is wonderful. Um, it's and the title sequence is just great. The editing and
Oh,
uh,
and the John Beale
oh
score.
God,
Uh,
but just the fact that they show the guy cutting when they go to the editing commercial editing title and
mhm.
things like that, it's pretty smart. I mean, it really
Oh,
is.
oh, definitely. But that movie has such likable characters, like you were saying, very much like Chainsaw. You really do give a shit about these people. It's one of the elements that people who make horror films always seem to forget. If we don't like your characters, we don't care how you kill them. It's not going to make us, enjoy your movie anymore.
Right,
Uh, you have to do one of two things, in my opinion. You have to make them extremely likable, or you do something that still requires creativity and talent to make them so, hated to where you want to see them die at least.
right,
What you don't want to do is craft a series of characters where people are just like, just die already so I can get the movie over with.
right.
And I don't think that happens in the Funhouse at all. I think every
I
single
don't either.
character is very unique. Um, I know my mom loved Buzz. Uh, she just loved that guy so much. He's got the little kind of southern drawl to his voice and
Yeah,
everything. Just such a great, likable character. He he's in love with the lead character, Amy. But he's not a lech. He's not forcing him. He's not what you get in a lot of horror films today, which is, oh, the stereotypical dude. We
right,
have to make every guy a piece of shit. His only reasoning to be on the date is to get in her pants. You don't get that vibe from Buzz
right.
at all. And it's just, again, just so wonderfully crafted. And Liz, I really like Liz. I really like Liz as a kid.
Yeah,
Yes, another crush.
I
An
know.
actress who I never saw end up in anything else really noteworthy,
No,
which kind of surprised me. And then you have the nerdy buddy, Richie. And what I love about that dynamic in that movie is Buzz and Richie are so opposite. Like, it's like, how do you guys even know each other? Which is really
right.
funny to me. It's like, do you guys, I can't see you hanging out at all. Maybe further into the 80s when Buzz needs some computer work done and and Richie's like, I work at Radio Shack, I'll fix your stuff. But
Right,
and we don't find out how they know each other. And that's fine because it just seems like a genuine relationship between characters, which has already been going on. Liz and Amy have probably known each other since, grade school kind of a
yeah.
thing, and it just all works.
And the truth is, if you are wondering how those guys found themselves together, um,
Mhm.
you're gonna wonder that within the first 2 years and the first 20 years and 30
Yeah,
years. It doesn't matter.
exactly.
You're always gonna say, gee, they're so different. What drew them together? But it's great.
Yeah.
Um, and it's a universal horror movie.
Yes, it does count as a universal horror movie, to the point that they were able to use the image of Frankenstein with the giant mask that
Yeah,
our monster wears,
yeah,
which to me was more terrifying than the creature underneath. There was something
yeah,
about that head because it's oversized and it's just the shade of color was so off. I'm just like, wow, is that what Frankenstein would look like in color? It's like, oh, that's so weird. And
yeah,
and the giant fake hands,
yeah.
I just so fucking good, man.
I I I really enjoyed that movie, and I again, Tobe Hooper is always going to suffer from it, but it ain't syndrome, you know. But
Right.
isn't that good? I mean, I'm not on. I don't mean how much it played on him, but
Right.
isn't it good that he was successful at Texas Chainsaw Massacre? He was successful at Funhouse. He was successful at Salem's Lot, and yet there's nothing to compare those. Nothing.
See, and the thing that gets me with the Funhouse is I don't understand how anyone can claim that it is unsuccessful in what it's trying to do.
Right.
You have you have a wonderful, hook for the storyline. These kids staying in a funhouse when they know they shouldn't. You have a wonderful concept for a monster. You have the whole thing with the little brother, which is just brilliant. The
Yep.
little brother chasing after them to
Yep.
go to the amusement park. How brilliant. And one of the most terrifying scenes in that movie is what? It's not even the monster. It's the fucking freak in a pickup truck who pulls up to the kid and then points a gun at him. And I'm just like, holy shit. And one could argue, well, what relevance does it have? It's like, it doesn't need to. That is Tobe Hooper right there. He's the type of filmmaker that's going to go, you know, it would be fucked up if this happened to this kid. So what he feels as horror is nothing compared to what he has at that moment. But,
Right.
this is your scariest moment so far.
Right.
He's
Exactly.
going to see a lot worse than that hillbilly in the truck who decided to mess with him.
Yep.
And there is, it's just in the finale of the film, the monster dies so well.
Yep.
It is a universal monster ending,
Yep.
as he's snatched up by the chain and the electricity is going off behind him. It's just, and it wasn't any unsuccessful movie financially. It cost $2 million to make that movie. It made 14 domestically. That's
Right.
and that's in 80s money. That's not a failure by any
Yep.
means.
No. Nope.
And I've talked to people at conventions. They're like, "Oh, well, the Dean Koontz book is so much better." And I'm like, "All right, first of all, get off your high horse because Koontz was hired to write that as a novelization, and he was such a prolific author even at that time. He was allowed to kind of go off in his own direction. That's why the book is so drastically different
Right.
than the movie." And that book is just its own thing. I don't even consider it connected to the film in any way, shape, or form, really.
No.
And I'm sorry, guys. Are we talking about Funhouse?
Yeah.
Yeah, talking about the
Okay,
Funhouse,
the
and
Funhouse.
it
And
was Hooper being able to work with a major studio at that point. He had the closest he had come to that prior was working with CBS for Salem's Lot, and
yep.
here he was. It was produced by Mace Neufeld, who went on to do The Hunt for Red October. So
Yep.
he was working with major players, and of course that led into uh, debatably his most successful film financially, which was Poltergeist.
Yep.
So 81 with the Funhouse, he had a good year in my opinion because of the Funhouse being such a remarkably well made and entertaining film, but it was
Yep.
also a year of a letdown because he actually was set to direct the 1981 film Venom, which for you younger folks out there, let me emphasize 1981, it's not related to Marvel in any way, shape, or form. And
Right.
Venom is actually sort of a cool movie in terms of its concept. What did you think of that movie overall, Rich?
You have to keep in mind that anything with snakes back then used to uh,
That's right.
almost a deal breaker back then. And of course, the funny thing is, I conditioned myself to look at them, and now they literally do not phase me on film.
Hey,
I'm
that's
not freaked
awesome.
out by them or anything else like that, which is just weird. But
See,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, what I was going to say, and what's interesting about Venom is that it was a repeat cycle for him. There were so many other projects that he became attached to, and for one reason or another, he would walk away from them.
Yep.
Because in 1979, for oh my God, what is his name? Oldest living Dick Clark, who also produced television movies, had brought him aboard to direct The Dark.
Yep.
And for some reason, one reason or another, they did not like Hooper or Hooper didn't like them. And ultimately, he was removed from that film and replaced by John Cardos.
Cardos.
Yeah, who in his own right is a good director, but I would have rather seen Hooper and what he would have done with it to direct the entire film.
Yeah.
But then Venom was a project that he did. It must have been in sometimes, I don't know if it was shot before or if it went into production after the Funhouse, but it was a project literally he was on from the beginning because he had developed it with the screenwriter. had chosen locations, and he shot for a total of 9 days, it says.
Jeez.
And a little darkness with Tobe in the sense that he, like many filmmakers, had many addictions during this time. Unfortunately, if you were in Hollywood, the likelihood of you using certain drugs, including cocaine, it was almost undoubtedly going to happen.
Yeah.
Very few filmmakers during that time were able to keep themselves away from it, and I don't think it has anything to do with your moral aptitude or
No.
anything. It was a situation of when you're in that environment, when in Rome.
You're in the biz.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of directors going to parties where literally there was a fucking communal tub of cocaine that
Yeah.
people were using. It was just that was the world that it was, and guys like Carpenter got roped into it, and unfortunately Hooper did.
Yeah.
And I don't
And
know if him being removed from these projects had anything to do with that, because there were stories that on the Funhouse he had to be essentially pulled out of his trailer some days,
yeah.
which is very sad. But I would find it in some weird kind of way commendable that he still made a competently well-made film in the Funhouse while doing what he was doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I tend to be the only person I know that didn't do that in the 80s.
I was gonna
Still.
say, you were in that world, Rich. You were like ground zero for that type of stuff. I mean,
Well,
aside from you just
I
being the dude
have
that you are, how did you not get roped into it?
I have certainly had my fair share of illegal drugs. That said, I never touched cocaine for whatever stupid reason or smart reason, whatever.
Or a blessing,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I had absolutely no. It was like, really? So I'm going to do this. I'm going to bring this through my nose, which, by the way, I don't have enough problems asthma wise and sinus wise, and for that, I'm going to get what as a payback? It's like, really
Right.
nothing. So no, but yeah, I'm like the only one I know who didn't.
Wes Craven, right? He also didn't subject himself to that.
Yeah, he was able to skate
Yeah,
out of that too.
yeah,
He and
Okay.
Romero,
good for
I
him.
think he and Romero
Right.
were more of the psychedelic drug guys.
Right.
They were into the
Oh,
idea of mushrooms and drugs that would again enhance your thought process and
gotcha.
tap into different worlds, if you will.
I
Okay.
always and I always stuck with stuff that mellowed me out, that just made me kind of relax. So it just wasn't my thing. And it's like, something like that. I'd say, all right. So wait a minute. Let me get this straight. So this is going to make me tougher to get along. Yeah, no, that's not happening. I'm sorry. I am sorry.
It requires stress relievers, not
Yeah,
stressors.
exactly. Oh my God. I,
See, my
I'd I'd hear something like, "You've got 2 hours to deliver 5 pages. Try some coke." I was like, "No, what's that
yeah,
gonna do?"
I'm
Oh
still gonna
man,
be behind at that point.
Exactly. Ah,
I'm just
maybe
gonna be
more
behind
so.
and jumping off the roof is all.
yeah, exactly.
Oh, terrible. Uh, really quick verge. So Ricky got me to watch the entirety of True Detective
Really?
season 1.
Oh
Yes.
my God! It's an actor's first season,
Show.
isn't it?
Yeah,
Oh
absolutely.
my God!
They tear it up. It was
Yeah.
so good. You're right. And we definitely need to do an episode or a show on that one. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that works for me.
And the
Oh,
one
I
character. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, but I mean, it's pretty perfect on like every level. The choice to be this, the choice to be that. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just, oh my God, it's so good.
But what I was going to bring up is the funny parallel that we're having right now where people are taking cocaine and the one character, he doesn't want stimulants. He wants barbiturates, anything that calms you down.
Right.
He's like, I need sleep.
Yeah.
But then he has to go undercover and he's
Then he
getting
goes
massive amount.
crazy. Oh my
Yeah.
god. Yeah. That was
Oh,
insane to me. But
Yeah.
yes, Absolutely.
And I'm so glad that McConaughey did that after he had done Dallas Buyers Club, because
Yeah.
he was so skinny from that movie. Because I feel
Yes.
that it worked for that character and what he was going through.
Agreed.
I think if he had done it after he was healthy looking again, I think something would have been
A little
just
off about it.
missing. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yep.
yeah.
And again, I don't use perfect often, but acting wise, perfect movie.
Oh yeah,
They
yeah.
did phenomenal. So
Oh
yeah.
my God. And the funny thing is, when it was announced, I wondered, well, that's an interesting dynamic, those two together.
Right?
But it almost hit me as, so this is going to be like a buddy thing. It's
That's
like,
my
You're
first
watching it.
word.
This is
dude.
not a buddy cop show at all. Oh my
Literally my
god.
first words to Ricky. I was like, all right, so we got two coppers. Like, is that what it's going to be? Is this like a buddy cop kind of show? And he's like, no, it's not.
Yep.
Absolutely not.
No, I
Sorry.
remember watching that. The moment I was like, yeah, the show is amazing, is when they did that freaking shot of the killer's property, and dude walks out and he's
Oh,
got the gas mask thing on and the knife, and I'm just like, oh Jesus, this is not going to be a regular cop show. And yeah, it just kept going and going, and I'm just like, oh, I love this.
yep.
And then season 2, I'm like, fuck season 2. But
The weakest, in my opinion, the weakest of the four.
because it's just a cop show, it's
Right.
just a generic cop show, and and by judging it as a cop show, it's fine.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even put it on the level of to me it's like Law and Order is what it felt like, except they were allowed to curse. It's
Yeah.
like I didn't see anything special in the performances whatsoever,
Well, then you weren't looking at the boobs,
because there wasn't enough boobs in season.
because I saw some really special stuff.
Okay, sorry
Which
for
is
the burp, guys.
that's why Rich never got into cocaine, because he was too busy with the boobs. That's
Hey,
Absolutely.
that is a very good distraction. Anything to keep you off of the cocaine. Oh,
Absolutely worked like a charm.
So going back to our original comments and everything, I don't know if that's why he was removed from projects, or if it was simply him not being comfortable with the studio system yet. I think it could just be like, hey, I'm used to running things in Austin. I
Mhm.
got my people and we just do our thing. So to move from independence, even at that time, into the studio system could have been jarring for him. And he just had a certain personality type.
Right.
And what's so disappointing about Venom, our listeners and viewers, eventually, when we started our show, we started recording so fast and the furious, like there was no time to get them all done. And we did an episode on what we referred to as horror noir, meaning horror films that combine the worlds of the criminal element, if you will. Venom would have been one of those movies, actually,
It
because you
would
have a
have.
bunch of criminals in a house trying to acquire something, and the horror element is a poisonous snake in the house.
Yep.
Oh no shit.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And that was part of Hooper's idea. He and the screenwriter came up with that idea.
Okay,
So
hold
I would have
on.
loved to seen his version of that. I think it would
Hold
have been
on.
really interesting.
You said poisonous snake or venomous snake. Now this snake, is it mutated in any way? Does it have like any kind of like vengeance spirit that's
Well,
guiding it?
they all have vengeance spirits. Let's nip that in the bud right away.
You're like,
All
snakes
snakes.
are here for no other purpose but to destroy humanity, as far as Rich is concerned.
But
Yep.
for this movie, for Venom, does it have any other premise, or is the snake just an ordinary snake?
I
Yeah, I
don't.
mean, it's just
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
snakes on a
Okay.
plane in a house. But it's one single
Okay.
snake, and it had a really. But what's crazy is Klaus Kinski was going to be in that movie. Which, sweetheart, you're not familiar with him at all at this point. I haven't shown you anything with this dude, but he was the actor that Werner Herzog worked with numerous times, and had a
Okay.
very volatile relationship because Werner's kind of crazy, and so is Klaus.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
to picture him and Tobe Hooper working together, holy shit.
Yeah.
That
And
would have been just wild.
Klaus Kinski is to those not in the know, is the scariest thing in every movie he shows up with, even if he's just sitting in a chair.
Even if it's not a horror movie.
Even if it's, yeah, if it could be a rom-com, and the damn thing is like, he'll just freak you the hell out.
I think the tamest he ever was in a movie was Crawl Space, directed by Ted Nicolau,
Yeah,
actually.
okay, so what does that say? A movie
Yeah, I
called
know. That's what.
Crawl Space is the tamest movie that this guy's been in. It's
But I could
just
just see him
great.
working with Toby and be like, just what a weird dynamic that would have been, because
Yeah,
Klaus, would he give him the same shit as he would Werner? It's like, why am I doing this? And Toby's, with his, I don't know, man. I'm just telling you, you go through here. This is what you do.
Wow.
Maybe it wouldn't have worked out. Maybe it would have been one or the other have quit eventually. But I kind of want to live in a universe where we see his version of that
yeah,
movie.
that would have been interesting.
And Toby kept going through that. He kept going through the Susan Lucci syndrome for a little bit. It's like, hey, I made Chainsaw. I made this. Let's make some other movies. And it was a hit and miss. I mean,
Yeah,
definitely when he finally hit, he would get Salem's Lot or something. But I mean, the original, the first time the thing was going to be remade wasn't even associated with Carpenter.
right.
'Cause that was back in '77, where Hooper was riding high on Chainsaw Massacre, and he was approached by Stuart Cohen, who ultimately went to Carpenter to do it later. But they had approached him, and him and Kim Henkel, who co-wrote Chainsaw Massacre, they did a draft, but it was rejected.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's another interesting take on that material. I would have, I don't know if that script exists somewhere to where we could read it, but I'm interested in if they tried to stick with the source material of the novella of Who Goes There, or if it was a direct remake of The Thing from Another World. It'd be really interesting to see that material.
yeah, absolutely.
I know Stuart Cohen, he was obsessed with the idea of The Thing being more like an Antarctica version of Moby Dick. And he kept saying he wanted it to be that. And then once he did go to Carpenter, Carpenter went and did his thing, and along with his co-writer, and made the classic that it is. But I do feel that Toby could have done something interesting there, and he kept having that happen many times throughout his career. And in fact, Poltergeist, which was his next big thing, the whole reason that came to be was his connection to Steven Spielberg, because he was going to do Night Skies.
Hmm.
And sweetheart, I don't know if you're familiar with this or not. Uh, I showed you Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and
You
uh,
hated it.
we know her feelings on that movie, which are completely warranted. Me watching it as a grown adult with kids, I totally saw my wife's point of view of, he's kind of a prick. He just leaves the entire planet and leaves his wife and kids behind. Terry Garr, no less. So I can kind of see that point of view there. But Night Skies was going to be the follow up to Close Encounters of the Third Kind because it was so successful. And the idea is that Close Encounters sequel was going to be basically just in the universe of, in the sense that it was going to be the same aliens, but it was designed to be, or at least during its progress, became more of a horror film,
Hmm.
because the studio was like, well, let's do it for less money and we can still make money and capitalize off of Close Encounters.
Yeah.
And it was written by John Sayles, who wrote The Howling, the screenplay for The Howling, and Brother from Another World, and a whole bunch
Yeah,
of other great films. And the idea, it was going to be a family in a house which is being bombarded by aliens trying to abduct them. So imagine almost Chainsaw Massacre, in a weird kind of way with these aliens.
yeah,
That's
And that's
fucking
why
terrifying.
Spielberg, very much like Martin Scorsese, is one of these guys. He watches fucking everything. So he was very familiar with Chainsaw Massacre, and that's why he went to Hooper for that project. But it never materialized. And oddly enough, somehow a lot of that material ended up in ET. I don't know how Night Skies morphs into ET, because that's a drastic overhaul of the script, pretty much.
you're right.
That's like saying, "Hey, Rich, we're gonna do this thing called Alf, but it turned into Alien." It's like,
Right. Yeah,
what?
exactly.
There's no Melmacians bursting out of
it's
people's
it's
chests. What the hell?
bare bones. You got the bones of that project in there. The bones of it. They're
No
they're
bones.
cats.
No
There's two
bones at all.
cats. There's two cats. That's
Cat's
the
fuss.
connection.
Cat's fuss. Uh, so yeah, that leads into Poltergeist. And what can we say about Poltergeist that hasn't been said? Because of course, the biggest controversy about this film to me that should not be a controversy, but it is, and you see it online all the time. I'm always going keyboard warrior on some idiot who's like, "Oh, Spielberg totally directed that movie," and I'm
Okay.
like, "You're out of your mind."
But before you get into the controversy, I actually can jump in on this one since I have something that I can talk about
Okay.
for Tobe Hooper. This is probably his very first movie that I've seen. And I didn't realize it was him because I don't keep up on directors like you guys do, or even actors for that matter. If somebody looks familiar, oh yeah, they were in this. Now more so. But then, no. I actually got to watch Poltergeist pre Ricky. Now,
Mhm.
not the whole thing. So again, snippets in little segments here and there. And that's pretty much it. I enjoyed what
Why
I watched of it
snippets?
because I'm always walking into a place where it's either playing and then I maybe sit down for a few minutes and then have to go. But it wasn't a thing where like, hey, come sit down and watch Poltergeist.
Right.
Just wasn't a thing. Not until Ricky. And then he's like, we're gonna sit down and watch Poltergeist. Because again, he wanted to introduce me to.
Yeah.
And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I loved everything about it. The story to the acting to again just even the effects. Oh my god, the effects are amazing as well. Stuff was scary.
Which the rumor was on the effects that those skeletons in the swimming pool in the finale
They're real.
were real.
They're
That's
real.
the rumor. I don't know if that's true or not.
Well, the truth is that, and I'm sure you know this, that at one point, every single skeleton that
In
we
film. Yep.
brought in was real
Real.
and from yeah.
Again, you have cadavers, you have skeletons because what do we have? We have medical facilities that required them. You have teaching places. You have things where folks had access to skeletons. And what's more believable than a skeleton? A skeleton.
Right, exactly.
Why are you going to craft one when you literally have one as a prop? So
Right. Yep.
But
even if
once you
they
did,
oh
oh, sorry, baby, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so once you did see the movie, aside from snippets, by that time you were with me, and I was probably showing it to the kids. Is that when you
Yeah.
finally saw it throughout?
Yeah.
And what was your judgment on it, being a
Again,
non-horror person?
it it was very good. What I consider even in my case, like I really like supernatural type elements. It doesn't scare me too much. Ghosts and
Mhm.
demons, it's sketchy. And this was just the right amount, in my opinion, of somebody who doesn't particularly enjoy horror. But watching it, it's the family that draws you in. It's the connections that they have. You forget that you're watching a horror movie because these fuckers, they make you like them. At some points they make you love them. It's like,
Right.
"Aw, this is a family that I could see, being friends with or even us on that level. Like, okay, this technically is us." So putting yourself in their shoes and what they're going through, it's heartbreaking and then at the same time exhilarating. So I forgot I was watching horror.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And the great part is that the cast, well, between Joe Beth and Greg, uh, they they were a good choice for the American family,
Mhm.
but I'd love to know who would have picked them first. Like I'm not if I'm thinking Greg T. Nelson back then I'm thinking um, Coach.
Yeah.
So I'm not thinking dad of two kids or through all three kids. I'm not thinking that, uh, and yet he really does hit on kind of all American father.
Mhm.
It's just all American father who coaches little league, that kind of thing.
Just
So
your
he
everyday
has that.
person. Yep.
Yeah, he's got that sports um, click to him,
Yeah.
but it doesn't overtake the parenting
No.
skills. They were interesting choices. I don't know anybody, like I said, who they'd be your first choice, but solid. I mean, I think it was great that they went with them.
See, and what's funny with that movie, when watching that as a kid, their relationship, Stephen and Diane, they, to me as a kid, I was like, wow, I hope that's how my marriage is. Not for my kid to be kidnapped by a ghost by any means,
Right.
but they just seem like such a good, solid couple.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And uh and just the way they clicked was so amazing. And again, yeah, he is like the all-American dad, but he doesn't seem like the type of dad that would, obviously trash Robbie for watching too much Star Wars. It's the
Right.
complete opposite. Their room is blanketed with Star Wars stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's something people try to correlate to Spielberg, and I would disagree. Because think about it, prior to this, the only time we saw Spielberg deal with the family dynamic was Jaws. I would argue that he did it poorly in Close Encounters. The Close Encounters family with Roy and what they go through is opposite of how the family, come
Mm,
together in Poltergeist.
right.
And I would say that's Toby's nuances,
Yeah.
because he has not families per se, in this way, but you have those core characters in Chainsaw. They're friends, but again, it's that feeling like, yeah, these people really know each other. They really are friends. Same thing in Funhouse. And if you want to argue family dynamic, Chainsaw has a family dynamic
Oh, it
in the
sure
Chainsaw
does.
family itself.
Yeah.
You know, they are their own. They protect their own and everything. So,
Yep.
in my opinion, Spielberg hadn't really hit his stride, not until like E.T. and then movies beyond that would I say that he was dealing with those type of family dynamics.
Right. No,
And it's
I
one of the things people try to attribute to the legend of him directing it instead of Toby, which I still think is full of shit, is that no, these are elements that were in Hooper's movies as well. You can't simply categorize it as a Spielberg thing, because even Spielberg really wasn't a Spielberg thing yet.
right. Well, I think that it's important to remember that Spielberg doesn't want to be known for directing Poltergeist any more than Hooper didn't want to be known, or wanted to be known as other than kind of faking his way through it. You know,
Mhm.
they they both had their parts to play. Spielberg was a producer who showed up to the set. He has every freaking right to, if he wants, but he should also know that you don't interfere. If you don't like when people interfered with you as director, you don't interfere with somebody else. And I'm not saying he did. What I'm saying is that if there's any Spielberg in Poltergeist, it's the sense that he was a good, strong producer and that he picked the right people.
Okay.
I,
So
I,
question.
yeah.
Question before you get in there. Can you guys explain what the actual controversy is? That
Well, the actual controversy is that Spielberg literally directed the film, and Hooper sat there most of the time doing nothing, and
why
that
did this
comes.
come up?
Because people misperceive Poltergeist as being a Spielberg movie, a Spielberg-like movie, and
Okay.
as Rick pointed out, it's not. I mean, in hindsight,
His
it's a
production part, yeah, he picked the
yeah,
right people to
but
do.
right, but the truth is Spielberg wasn't Spielberg when
By this
or
time,
let's say
or
family Spielberg wasn't family Spielberg
just yet.
when Poltergeist came out.
Okay.
And then the other thing, which is so insulting, is that they're basically saying Poltergeist is a really great movie, and Toby did not have the chops to be able to direct a really, big budget good movie. And to that I say bullshit.
Yeah.
He
Yeah, it's horribly
clearly
demeaning.
did.
Horribly.
Yeah, it absolutely. And like he needed that shit. I mean, I was so upset from the first time I heard it. Well, no, the first time I heard it, I didn't. I literally said something that I sadly say too often nowadays. Oh, they can't be that fucking stupid to believe that. Well,
I mean, what
they
doesn't
were.
help is that over the years, so many people, and again, it's a misinterpretation of what he was doing on the set. Now, what I will say is, I think Steven overstepped his boundaries numerous times. But I think in a weird way, it was due to his relationship with George Lucas. If you look at the Raiders of the Lost Ark, what is the relationship on that movie? Lucas was always there.
Right.
See, but Lucas never wanted to be the director, but
Right.
he was working with Spielberg, who was open to all that information. So if you look at pictures from the set of Raiders, 9 times out of 10, it's Spielberg and Lucas together.
Right.
But at
Okay.
no time did anyone go, "Oh, Lucas really directed that movie," right? Spielberg did the same thing on Gremlins,
Yep.
but you don't hear Joe Dante didn't direct
You
that
don't take
movie.
it away from Dante. Okay.
No,
You
this
you
is
you
this is a
you
slam against Toby
it happened
Hooper.
with Back to the Future,
Yeah.
but you don't hear people say that Zemeckis didn't direct that movie.
So
Yet
when
Zemeckis was a lot newer.
oh
I won't say
He's definitely more
instilling.
inexperienced at the time,
Yeah,
definitely compared
exactly.
to
So if he was going to walk in and give a gentle nudge occasionally, Back to the Future would have been the movie.
yeah, so how long after Poltergeist came out did these rumors start coming out?
Start coming out almost
it.
immediately. Go
Almost
away.
immediately.
Yeah, go
Okay.
away. Not even today.
Never.
And I will not. You know how we've said before, you can't argue with a flat earther. I
You can't
I
argue with a
I will
Spielberg.
not even. I don't care who it is. If someone comes down from the heavens and
It
and
says
and and wants to discuss the topic, it's not worth my time.
There was the podcast isn't around anymore. It transformed into another podcast
okay.
called Shockwaves.
Hmm.
And the reason Hooper came about in conversation, and it was so upsetting to me because one of the guys on that show I respect a great deal. In fact, he finally just directed his own film. Always appreciated his point of view, but I was so pissed off at him because he was one of the producers on this podcast, and they had the director of fucking Annabelle, a guy by the name of John Lenote, whose father was one of the camera people on Poltergeist.
Yeah.
And while interviewing for Annabelle, for some reason, this motherfucker decided to go into the conversation about, Tobe Hooper didn't direct Poltergeist, and talked about how he was assisting his father, and undoubtedly Spielberg was the director.
Yeah.
I was so pissed off at that podcast because I would have, first of all, the recording would have never been heard. I would have been
Right.
like, all right, John, we're going to step the fuck off that. We're here for you to promote your shitty James Wan produced movie. We're not here to talk about Tobe Hooper and his talent or lack thereof. So let's just bypass that. But the
Yeah.
fact that they rolled with it just reignited the whole goddamn thing all over again throughout the younger group of horror film people.
Yeah.
And it was so upsetting. And the fact is, Hooper didn't just get screwed down the line with these rumors and everything. He got screwed by the studio. If you look at the posters,
Oh.
the Poltergeist, the promotional posters, Steven Spielberg's fucking name is bigger than Tobe Hooper. It is the only time you will find a piece of media produced by a studio that puts the producer before the director,
Oh shit.
in bigger writing and a bigger font than the
Yeah.
director. To the point
That.
where the Directors Guild, on Hooper's behalf, Hooper didn't even want to do this. Hooper really was just kind of staying out of the whole thing. He's just like, it is what it is. Again, he's learning the studio system. So he probably figured this is just the way it works. I
Right.
took the job. This is what's happening. The DGA took MGM to task, took them to court, and they had to pay 15 grand in 80s money to Hooper because of that situation, just because of the advertising for the film.
Because they feel that they fucked him over on it.
Exactly.
Huh.
And if not for this, I think the same exact thing would have happened to Batteries Not Included.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is too, what just again, how people can deny the moments of Poltergeist that are unabashedly Hoopers. When Diane is in the kitchen, and it's around the sequence, or it is the sequence with the chair moving, and she walks in and she sees things moved around again, and Carol Ann comes from behind her and scares her. That is a fucking Tobe Hooper shot.
Yeah,
The framing, the concept of that shot, the way it's laid out, that is Hooper. That is not Spielberg. That's not a thing he does.
right.
The closest to a jump scare in Jaws is what? When Brody's,
Chunk some of
fishing,
this shit.
chumming the fish. And even that is not a jump scare per se,
And they had to
Right.
add in the head, right?
Yeah,
The
right, yeah.
in
These
the
were
boat
things that were
scene.
done
Yeah.
later, but those are not his idea of a scare, and Hooper's are different, and you see it.
Yeah.
You see it across the board. And it's just, again, it's so demeaning to such a talented man, and he had to carry that shit with him for years.
Yeah. And people who are in the know, when they jump onto this storyline, to me just shows how little they don't know.
I
You
mean,
know
the
what I
one thing I
mean?
can tell, the one thing I can say about Spielberg is that at least he did draft an open letter
Yep.
in the Hollywood Reporter or Variety, one of the two.
Mhm.
I have the quote written.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah, this is what he stated in his letter. Regrettably, some of the press has misunderstood the rather unique creative relationship which you and I, because this is a letter to Toby, you and
Okay.
I shared throughout the making of Poltergeist. I enjoyed your openness in allowing me, as a writer and a producer, a wide berth for creative involvement, just as I know you were happy with the freedom you had to direct Poltergeist so wonderfully. Through the screenplay, you accepted a vision of this very intense movie from the start, and as the director, you delivered the goods. You performed responsibly and professionally throughout, and I wish you a great success.
Yep.
The man
So at
himself,
least he did go to the bad, in the
right?
early stages of it. Now I don't think he even cares about it. Obviously, Toby's gone, and
Yeah.
most people, I don't think even. First of all, Steven doesn't really talk to many people nowadays, anyways. Any interviews he has, it's all set up by the studio.
Yeah.
You're told what to ask. You're not going to have some young buck in there saying, he didn't direct. That's not going to happen.
Right. No,
And the thing is, he did keep working with Toby down the line.
yeah.
He hired him to work on the Taken miniseries, which was again a close encounter like kind of thing with alien abductions. Hooper directed it was either one or two segments of that series, and he directed for Amazing Stories.
Yep. Yeah.
But you don't hear people say, "Oh, that episode of Taken wasn't directed by Hooper. That was all Spielberg. He didn't do that Amazing Stories. That was all Spielberg."
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, if you can't have one thing without the other, either Spielberg directed part of Poltergeist, or and directed part of everything else that he produced,
Exactly.
or he didn't. And I would like to think enough of Steven Spielberg to basically say he did the right thing. He shut that crap down. If I were he, uh, I wouldn't even entertain it anymore. I would look at the person who asked it and go, seriously? Come on, man.
Get the hell out of here, please.
Yeah, exactly.
Leave my office.
Yep.
I think ultimately Poltergeist uh, is such an important part of his filmography because it showed what he was able to do with a major budget and a big studio level schedule. And he would go on to do movies just as expensive, but never getting the caliber of exposure that Poltergeist did. And I really wish he had been able to parlay that into another studio gig, to where he could have gone the route of Carpenter, because he truly was that talented of a guy.
Yeah, it's funny to me that, and I don't mean haha. Believe me, I don't mean haha. The fact that they can use him as a punching bag, which I honestly think this is the creative equivalent to using somebody as a punching bag. When they did not, at large, they did not have the balls to do that to anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the problems is the fact that Chainsaw is so dark and dusty, and Poltergeist is so clean and polished that they can't see how one guy could have directed them both. It's like, okay, but
I
I
mean,
know.
Hooper is he's the perfect example of, but that guy didn't have that happen to him. Why are you picking on me?
exactly.
Because look at every other genre filmmaker, Carpenter, Romero. None of them, when they had their bumps, were they attacked as badly as Hooper. And I
Right.
don't mean just from, the Poltergeist situation. I mean any movie he even made after that.
Yep.
If it was lesser than Chainsaw, by the critics' point of view, not only was it lesser than, it was shit. It had
Yeah.
no redeeming value
Oh,
whatsoever, and you were a one-trick pony. But you never heard people say that about Carpenter, Romero, Craven, Cronenberg, who all made bumps in their careers.
Yeah. And you cannot find a worse example of a one-trick pony than Tobe Hooper.
And
I
and the
mean,
thing is, if there was any guy who could have went out there and said, "Hey, fuck every one of you. What about these guys?" But he never did that. I think that in a weird kind of way is commendable, that he didn't come to his own defense. He's just like, I'm just going to keep doing my thing.
yeah, yeah, horrible. For a guy I respected that much, it's horrible that he had to go through that. And we will find out uh, about a solid end of a career next time.
Rich, is there anything else that you'd like to say in this wrap up?
Don't miss the next one, because of those who thought that Hooper was at any point in his career down for the count, man, you are so freaking wrong. And bye, and love you guys.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.
And Ricky, do you have any last words that you'd like to say on this particular subject?
Just if you can get the overseas Arrow release of Chainsaw 2, which has Hooper's short films, where he really talks about culture and how it was being wiped out by the.
Chink! Thank you so much, guys, for joining us. We'll catch you on the next round. Bye.